Welcome back to Modern Grunt Survival. Today, we're going to be talking about our first episode on self-defense, and today's defense topic is situational awareness. Now, we were going to cover concealment versus cover, ironically enough, that was going to be the topic. But after doing some thinking, I actually realized that situational awareness is not only more important than knowing the difference between cover and concealment, but quite honestly, it is the foundational skill for self-defense. So that is what we're going to cover today. So what is situational awareness? As you might have guessed by now, situational awareness is just being aware of what's going on around you, being aware of the situation. That requires a couple of things that modern society hasn't really been too great on influencing people to develop. Specifically, humility, okay? You have to be able to humble yourself enough to get out of your own head and really pay attention to what is going on around you. If you're not able to do that, you're going to have a really hard time being able to accomplish any sort of self-defense. Because if you're not aware that the situation is going to deteriorate or become dangerous to you, you're going to be reacting to the situation and not being proactive during the situation. And what I mean by that is that you're going to be, one, more susceptible to going into the fight or flight response, which is not going to do you any favors. And two, you're going to be less likely to know what to do in said situation. Now, we're talking about situation. What situations are we talking about? Well, it could be anything. It could be, you broke your leg while you're out hiking, right? That's a first aid situation, right? But it's also could turn into a survival situation. If there's wildlife, that's where your self-defense comes in, or maybe some malicious people out there on the trail. Hopefully not, because we have some beautiful trails. But point being is that what we don't want is to be caught in a situation where we're ill prepared to at least handle it or improvise our way through it if need be. That's another thing. Keep in mind, you could do all the training in the world, you could spend all the money in the world on training. There's no amount of time, hours, years, and experience that's ever going to prepare you fully for the situations you might encounter. So keep that in mind as well. Being able to problem solve on the fly, adapt, improvise to the situation, that is going to be way more vital in your situational awareness skills than any training you've ever had. Now, the training that you get gives you a baseline reference that you can utilize for that adaptation in real time. And you'll see that later on in the defense videos. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it's not always about being in the wild, right? Being in the wild, situational awareness is very important, right? You want to keep an eye out for things that might harm or kill you while you're out and about enjoying the wilderness. Things being dangerous shouldn't be a deterrent to anyone, right? If anyone's been in a car recently, that's a pretty dangerous, type of transportation, but most people don't really think about it because they're so accustomed to it. They have established that rationale that the risk is worth the convenience and the efficiency that the vehicle presents. Similarly, the wilderness is amazingly beneficial for your health, for your mental health as well. And it shouldn't be deterred because there's danger in it. So knowing how to mitigate that danger is part of your self-defense, whether you realize it or not. That's another thing. People get so wrapped up in some bad guy coming up to me, robbing me with a gun. Can that situation happen? Absolutely. And you should be ready for that. But what are the more likely self-defense situations you might encounter yourself? Outside of a mugging, right? What about just defending yourself against nature? Defending yourself against, hard times. That's another part of your self-defense. Preparation for difficult times ahead. A savings plan could be considered a part of your self-defense plan as well if you really give it some thought. So those are the things that we're going to consider as part of our self-defense plan here on this channel. That's another thing we're going to talk about is, and we're stressing on in this channel, is training. There's no amount of watching these videos or any videos on YouTube that's ever going to prepare you physically for what you're doing. Now, mentally, sure, these can spark the interest, but it isn't until you get out there and do it for yourself that you're really going to see the value in all of the information that we're sharing here and on Patreon. How do I become more situationally aware? All right, a couple of things. Being more situationally aware could be just as simple as keeping up with multiple sources of news that are contrasting from one another. Now, this isn't a sponsor for them, but if you guys would like to sponsor us, please let us know. Many different news sources kind of laid out on a spectrum so you can really see for yourself what it is. I recommend Ground News. They are all over YouTube. If you've ever kind of like dug around some of these topics, a lot of them are sponsored by Ground News. So I would recommend that as a good resource because it does allow you to get a kind of temperature on what's going on in real time, both you know, nationally, abroad, and maybe even locally in some area, in some cases. So do take a look at that. Another thing you could do to be just in your own personal life, not digitally, so to speak, is just pay attention to as much as you can, as many details as you can, and try developing that skill while you're in day-to-day situations. And a good way to maybe even develop some relationships that you might have, point out the details that you notice about someone. Good things, all good things, all good things. Put out the details that you notice about someone to them in real time and watch them be like, oh my gosh, you noticed. It's something to be constantly doing, constantly working that mental muscle of paying attention to what's around you. Paying attention is probably one of the most underestimated skills that I've ever come across in modern society. And it is one of the rarest skills that I have come across in this day and age. And I find that to be a little depressing. Just all that aside, what I do like about that skill is that it's always something people can just develop easily. It's free. You don't have to get a subscription. You don't have to pay me or anybody else. You don't have to go on Patreon. You can just work on that yourself. Now, if you do want some like kind of more specific exercises as to like how to get better at that, that will be on Patreon. And I say paying attention, I mean like visually putting your eyes on things. But active listening is also really good too. How well can you remember things the first time that they're told to you? That's a really big skill that you can develop. I think that about covers it for situational awareness as for right now. Before we end this video though, the Department of Homeland Security's Run, Hide, Fight. Let's talk about that for just a second before we end this video, because there's just a lot of, I've personally seen standard operating procedures and companies, entire organizations treating Run, Hide, Fight as a instruction manual for what to do. And that is not what DHS intended Run, Hide, Fight to be. So first thing is first, Run, Hide, Fight isn't necessarily bad. The way it's interpreted, however, is horrible and will actually get more people harmed than saved. Let me explain what I mean by that. So generally speaking, when someone is in an active shooter situation, they are going to be in extreme danger, okay? That is where the next video in this series is going to come in very handy, because we're going to cover the differences between what concealment and cover mean. Cover being what is actually going to save your life, and concealment being the hide in Run, Hide, Fight. So first off, run hide, fight is not the step of order of things you do. Those are simply your 3 options that you have to choose from in real time, depending on the situation that you're in. So what DHS is really doing is they're giving companies leeway on how the specifics of that SOP should be, SOP being our standard operating procedures. So what that means is that companies should draw from run, hide, fight influences the options and then adapt those options in real time to specific scenarios and situations of their properties or organizations, or however that applies. That's the difference. And the common narrative is that you first run, then you hide, and then if you have to, you fight. That is not what you should do in an active shooter situation. To make a long story short, which we will cover more in depth in the next video, is the cover and concealment are the first things you should look for. Concealment being the last resort of if you cannot find cover, which the chances if you finding cover from an active shooter situation are very slim, unless you're just happen to be in a good space for it. Again, the next video will get into more in depth as to how that is and why that is, but all you need to know is that you need protection from that firearm as soon as possible, and running is not giving you any protection. In fact, the way that the human eye works, running is making you a target. So unless running is your only option, in other words, you have no cover or concealment around you, then yes, running should be your first thing. Or if you're within hand and arm distance of the shooter, fight should be your first thing, because you're right there. You can do something. At the very least, fight them, right? Because you know if you don't fight them, the chances are that you may end up on the list of casualties. You don't want that, right? In fact, you don't want that list to even be a thing. So if you're that close to them and you have the ability or the muster, you don't even have to know any sort of fighting. If you want to just take that person down bad enough, your sheer will can make a huge difference in that situation. It might be goofy and sloppy, but who cares? It could be the effective thing that keeps them anybody from getting hurt, and that's really what that fight and hide, run, hide, fight is that if that opportunity presents itself, that should be your first go-to. So these are 3 options. They're not necessarily a list or in the order of things to do. So keep that in mind specifically for the next video, but also keep that in mind if you see any other active shooter situations in the future, or if you analyze some previous ones in the past. Also, situational awareness in those type of situations is very handy. If you hear that first round pop off, you know you're not an armed individual, you know there's not good cover and concealment in that area. Your first thing needs to be to evade and escape as quickly as possible from that area, because you don't have a say in that fight, nor do you even want to get into that fight if you don't have the means of taking down that target. So thanks again for watching and keeping up with our videos. I hope you've liked them so far. If you like this one and the different things that we talked about with self-defense, please drop us a like. If you got any questions on what I covered, anything else that you want to see us cover as far as self-defense goes, drop it in the comments below. If you do want to see and get notified of our next videos, please subscribe and hit the bell. And thanks for watching again. Really appreciate it. Keep an eye out for our Patreon coming on in the future. Stay alert, stay alert.